Cloud-first development helps your business move fast, but misconfigurations and blind spots are part of the deal. App and dev teams get the flexibility, while security teams are left with the stress of managing new risk using legacy workflows. ExtraHop Reveal X provides cloud-native network detection and response, backed by cloud-scale machine learning that helps you spot threats and unify processes across hybrid environments. Learn more at extrahop.com/securityweekly. That's extrahop.com/securityweekly. Let the team at Black Hills Information Security test your defenses. With over 10 years of experience in penetration testing, red teaming, and threat hunting, the testers at Black Hills will help you find the holes in your security before the bad guys do. The team at Black Hills cares about educating and sharing their knowledge by creating countless blogs, open source tools, and webcasts for you to learn more about the tradecraft of pen testing and red teaming. Visit securityweekly.com/BHIS to join their mailing list and view the latest blogs and webcasts from Black Hills Information Security. Keep your company and products relevant, competitive, and reliable by standardizing your security framework to protect intellectual property, become a reliable business partner, and guard financial and customer information. Standards Connect is an online standards management solution from ANSI. It's Standards Access Simplified. Standards Connect is a cost-saving, fully customizable solution for entrepreneurs and companies that spend $2,000 or more per year on standards and want to translate spend into a subscription model, want to simplify access, search, monitoring, and collaboration, or need a centralized hub of standards for multiple users at one or more locations. Get a free trial at securityweekly.com/ANSI. That's /ANSI.
Welcome back to Business Security Weekly. I am your host, Matt Alderman, joined by Paul Asadorian and Jason Albuquerque. We need your help in a survey we are running for research purposes for an upcoming webcast. Please visit securityweekly.com/5 stages of automation maturity to submit your responses to our survey. We're trying to measure how well people are doing with automating certain security processes and kind of we'll provide those results and kind of share what we've learned from the survey in a webcast coming up in November. We also have exciting news about our programming. Starting in Q4, Security Weekly is going to start a brand new podcast called Security and Compliance Weekly, which will focus on the integration of security and compliance. Mr. Jeff Mann will host the show. I will co-host with him. Also in Q4, we're restarting Tradecraft Security Weekly. Tyler Robinson will be bringing us new tips and techniques for red teamers. Look for both of those new shows starting in October. All right, gentlemen, let's get into some articles for the week.
Very good, very good.
Yeah, I'm going to start with this, why new leaders should make decisions slowly. This was an interesting article for me. You know, one of the things when Paul and I were having the conversations last year about this time, actually, about coming over to Security Weekly as the CEO, Paul's got all these great ideas. We're like, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, do this. And so it would have been very easy to come into Security Weekly and start doing a whole bunch of stuff.
Right.
And this article talks about, you know, why leaders sometimes fail early on because sometimes they're making decisions too quickly or they're trying to make too many changes in the environment. One of the things we decided to do was kind of focus on some of our operational processes and kind of get those nailed down. We wanted to make some changes to the website, which, oh my gosh, we're almost done with. Just a couple little tweaks so that we can get our content to our audience faster, right? So we chose some very strategic things we wanted to focus on. And yeah, we might have been a little slower than we probably wanted to when we first thought about it.
Yeah, I think, you know, sometimes you do have to act quickly.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it depends on the scenario, right? I mean, when you take a look at it, you're walking in the door, you just got hired into a new role, you want to make a big impact. That's human nature, right?
Right.
But at the end of the day, you have to kind of take a look at the environment around you, right? Are you in a place where you have to walk in the door and you're in this like turnaround situation, right? You have to take a brand and reinvent the brand or reinvent the department. That may give you a little bit of leeway to make some good, quick decisions to kind of help that quick turnaround. But if you're walking in the door to a culture that already exists, already has processes, already has a successful leadership team in place, you got to take it a little bit more slow, right? Because the last thing you want to do is walk in the door and bulldoze the department you're walking into, right? I mean, at that point, you have a choice. You can either bulldoze and break something down, or you can take that slow, methodical, process where you're going to go in there thinking, I'm going to learn this organization, I'm going to learn the culture, I'm going to learn what's happening, and then I'm going to help influence from there, right?
I had an advantage when I was asking Matt to come on the team. Is I knew he wasn't the bulldozer mentality because I had already worked with Matt, who came into an environment, and I'm like, nope, that's not the way Matt works, right? But also, I think making decisions as a leader, it's about prioritizing and executing,
Absolutely.
right? But on a more grandiose scale, like what the SEAL team book talks about in a battle scenario, right? But if you step back, I kind of put them in like 3 different buckets in my experience, right? Sometimes there are things like literally sometimes on fire, right?
Sure, absolutely.
Or failing that we have to execute on, right? Like right now we're trying to get approval through an API. Like, unfortunately, this is on fire, takes priority. There's other things that, Matt and I have in the team have collectively prioritized to be like, yep, this is what we're going to be pushing forward on, and not just us, but all organizations, right? Then I feel like there's things that may seem like they fall into the first 2 buckets, but really don't. And I find sometimes if you wait long enough, either they're no longer issues because you've done projects in the first 2 buckets, or the problem is completely different and requires a completely different solution because you've waited so long. I think the important point for a leader is identifying things in those buckets and knowing which things can push off, because either they don't matter now, they might not matter in the future, or that there's going to be so much change that the solution is going to be completely different.
You're not going to have the ability to execute on it well.
Right.
If you have too much noise on your plate, you're not going to get anything done well, right? So take those focus areas, find where you can make the best impact, right? And focus on that. So at least you can show progress, you can show maturity, you can show that as a leader you were the right hire to come into this organization, but you can't overwhelm the teams and yourself with too many projects and too many things in the popper, right?
I think we've done a great job of setting priority, and I think some of the most efficient and awesome teams out there, one of the things I think they consistently do well is they know what to prioritize.
I mean, I'm going to be honest. Any time I've been hired into a leadership position, one of the first things I say is I'm going to provide you with a 120-day plan. Right.
Yeah.
That's my objective is I'm going to show you exactly what at a high level, what my map is for the next 120 days. Right. And I usually break it into a few segments. It's time to prepare, right? I have to walk in the door, learn the culture, learn the other business unit leaders, learn my peers,
and you have to
build relationships.
Like Matt said, like I have a lot of ideas. They call me the salad shooter, but I'm like, let's throw it all out there, right? Now he's like, this is like I was brainstorm. Okay, then Matt goes back and he makes his spreadsheets, and it comes back in a nice prioritized list, right?
That's it, right?
Those are the kinds of people just one role that you need on your team. And I would say it's an absolute requirement to have someone on your team like that.
And that's part of it, right? You go in there and you assess the current state. What's the current state of affairs, right? And then from there, you can build a plan, right? And then from there, you start communicating with the other business leaders and the stakeholders and maybe your leadership team on, all right, here are all the different priorities that I'm bubbling up, and here's my plan to act on those. And throughout that entire cycle, it's funny, when I build out the 120-day plan, I put communication across the top of all of them. Because constant communication in your first 120 days is probably the most important thing you can do.
Yeah. I mean, that's why we build a plan. That's why we execute on that plan. That's why we talk about that plan every single month. You talked about the first 120 days. We're 10 months into this rodeo with me, and it's communication. That transparency on how we're doing against plan is super important to make sure that, look, we put a plan in place. Here's how we're executing. Here's the things we still have to do. And that keeps the entire team aligned to the vision of where we're going.
And Matt, one thing I really like too is I think you can put some decisions off if you come up with an interim solution. And one example that I think I've given on the show before is, we had some process things, and I'm like, this could be solved by software. I'm like, in the meantime, let's try the whiteboard thing. And you know what? That's getting us through. So going to, and I took this from the 100%. Phoenix project, right? I'm like, let's just create whiteboards for now. And that buys us time.
100%.
Right? And so you can make the more impactful decisions later, because going to Staples and buying a couple of whiteboards, sitting with the team for a half an hour and figuring it all out, I'm like, okay, we're off to the races.
There's nothing wrong with putting stopgaps in place. But again, the communication's key, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's talking to the team and saying, hey, listen, for quarter one and quarter two, we're going to leverage the stopgap, and then Q3 we're going to invest, and then here's our implementation timeline, right? And
to the article's point, Matt, that I think gives you time to make a better decision down the road, right? And in this case, I think it's a shining example of, well, we've done the process in whiteboards, so when either we go buy a solution, host some of it in a cloud service, develop some of our own, hire whatever the solution is. We now have a much better set of requirements.
And I'm going to be honest with you, that's a blessing that you guys did that here, because many times organizations will buy solutions and try to retrofit their legacy process.
Huge mistake.
That's a huge mistake, right? So I always say if you're going to invest in a new solution, the first thing you do is you reevaluate your process, right? I mean, you have to, right?
And it's
reevaluate the process, adjust it if you need.
It's painstaking.
It is. But at the end of the day, you're investing in the future, right? Instead of thinking in the moment, I just need a new shiny blinky tool to fix everything. That's not going to happen. Right. The other thing I want to add here too is communicating to the team measures, right? So this is what success equals.
Yes.
Right? To be able to have that measurement and say, this is the measurement of success within our organization. I think that's important as well, because we all need that North Star to be able to, guide us to. So having those metrics, communicated to the team is huge.
Definitely. I mean, our metrics are pretty straightforward today. That they'll evolve over time, but we kind of knew what we needed to do in 2019, and so we know what those metrics.
Yeah, and I mean, at the end of the day, it's a marathon, right? It's always continuous improvement.
Absolutely.
That's the nature of the business we're in. We're always improving everything we do.
Exactly. The second article takes a slightly different course. This is kind of on the other side, and this is talking about restructuring, and this is the Kraft Heinz merger, and some of the pain that Kraft and Heinz went through in the restructure. And the article starts out that there was a simple formula, right? You buy a company, you trim the fat, you reinvest the growth to facilitate, and you reap all the money, right? Well, that doesn't always work.
Right.
And the reason I pulled this article in is we're starting to see some very interesting mergers and acquisitions in our space. We're seeing private equity firms move in and buy some interesting companies. We're seeing other companies merge with other companies. And this article talks about some of the mistakes of restructuring and some of the things not to forget about, like innovation,
right.
Which is one of the big things that really killed Kraft Heinz, was not innovating to keep up with the market.
Yeah, I think that was the key, right? They weren't paying attention to the market that was out there, and they were just hanging their hat on legacy processes and in their legacy product. When at that point in time, the market was dictating you need healthier solutions. You need, we need to have a healthier base of the food products that we have out there, and they weren't doing that. They were sticking with the same old while they were going through this consolidation process. So, they got behind the eight ball because they weren't innovating.
And we've definitely seen this in security too.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
And I can notice this trend in the security market, and because we follow it so closely, you can see the larger companies will acquire the smaller companies, and you can sometimes sense that kind of dip in innovation, right? And we talk to customers, and we visit them at booths, and we do briefings. You kind of get a sense for that, and what you hope is that they come out of that with a much higher level of innovation and solutions that are really solving people's problems because they've integrated those technologies together. However, I think it's one of the more difficult things to do in business in general, is to take those different teams, those different technologies.
Absolutely.
And so what is it? Palo Alto, is it Cortex from Palo Alto, right? Isn't that what they?
Correct.
Yeah. That's what Palo Alto's trying to do. Now, I'm very hopeful that that's going to be a really awesome solution. But it's a lot of work. I think so far, and I have yet to do a briefing with the Cortex team, but I want to do that.
It's a ton of work. I mean, my organization went through that 3 years ago with the Carousel Atrion acquisition, right?
Yep.
I'm going to be honest with you. It's all about the leadership, right? At that point, you have two separate companies operating in two different ways with two separate, IT departments, technologies, processes. And it's really the job of the leadership team to bring them all together. And this article gets into it, right? There's, talking about how humans react to that, right? They're either in an environment where they can thrive, or they become, they get caught in that fight or flight mode, right? Where they're scared for their jobs, they're scared for what's going to happen to their positions and in their teams and
great
things of that
examples
nature.
of that in Good to Great, and some of the other books we've talked about too.
But having strong leadership who communicates and actually puts forward what's going to happen and what the plan of the organization is.
It was one of the big differences between the good and the great companies.
That's
right?
it. right? So having that strong leadership. I mean, 3 years later, we're doing incredibly as a company because our leadership took that seriously, and they wanted to have one cohesive organization that worked together to make something bigger and better than what we both were.
But I think you make a good point now that I think about it after we talked about it, is that I come back to, if you lose sight of what the market wants, I think you can get really hung up on how you're restructuring, how you're refitting everything together, and come out of it and have lost sight of what the market demands. And a lot of those good to great examples, the good companies, they're not bad companies, they just weren't the great ones. They came out of that and they lost sight of what the market. The great ones made some really huge sweeping changes. Not only did that organizationally, but didn't lose sight of, and actually were innovative on delivering to their market specifically, or even changing who their market is and executing on that extremely well.
I would argue that leadership did an incredible job making sure that all of the resources in their organization still focused on innovation instead of being in fight or flight.
Focused on the
because when you're in fight or flight, you're going to shut down. You're not going to be innovative, right? As an employee of an organization like that. So, it's imperative of leadership teams to continue to push for innovation and push for folks to challenge the process. There's no better time to challenge the process than during an acquisition mode, right?
Yeah. And I think the article does a really good job of identifying the difference between survive and thrive, and why having a thrive culture drives innovation, right? You want to do the right things. You want to continue to grow. If you're in survival mode and you're cost cutting and skinnying everything down, that's when you're going to lose sight of the market, and that's when you get in a lot of trouble.
Oh, absolutely. And then the rumor mill and assumptions and those type of things run rampant through the organization, and then employees start losing trust in leadership. It's a vicious cycle if you don't do it correctly.
Yeah, definitely. E equals MC squared. How do we apply that to our daily lives? This was a very interesting article talking about the balance of time, energy, mass, and speed, and how those components of Einstein's equation need to be balanced in our daily lives to make us more productive and more happy. So, this was an interesting, fun little read.
Yeah, it was pretty funny. One of the opening lines was, "Bust your ass too hard, you'll fall in bed and be exhausted. If you bust your ass for too long, in seconds will feel like minutes." And then it's like, if you bust your ass too hard and too long, you're done, right? You have no more energy to do anything. So that opening line is just like, wow, it makes sense to have balance in life, right? And we've talked about this on the show before. It's, if you don't have balance, you're literally going to run yourself ragged, and then you're doing no justice to the organization, you're doing no justice to yourself, and you're doing no justice to your team.
Yeah, it's funny. I've been trying to get up early along those lines, right? Speaking of like running yourself ragged. And through the summer, it was easier because family and kids didn't have to be. Now I got kids that got to be places. So you try and adjust your schedule, and like sometimes the wife will ask, she'll be like, "You get up early and working?" I'm like, "I don't know." Like, tonight and tomorrow morning, one of those things, like if my body feels like it needs sleep, this is one of the ones where if I need sleep, I'm going to get sleep. If I'm up early, I'm going to work. It's one of those kind of days where my body chooses what my schedule is. And a lot of times I do that on the weekends to make sure that you don't get burnt out, because then it's going to be harder to keep to the schedule once the week comes. If you want to get up a little early, if you want to get up at 4:30 instead of 5, if you haven't rested, over the weekend. And again, that speaks to the point of balance, right?
It is, right? And I love the way the article laid it out about, different ways to balance time, energy, mass, and speed. But then they also threw in this fifth variable, emotion. And if you pay attention to your own emotions, you'll know when you're feeling cranky or irritable, and something's up, right? So pay attention to the way you're feeling, right? If you're feeling extra angry or extra depressed or whatever the case may be, you really need to pay attention to that and say, all right, where am I losing balance in my life? Is it I'm not getting enough sleep? I'm working too hard? I'm focusing
not exercising
too much.
enough.
That's it. Right.
That's when my wife knows whether I need to eat or not.
Yes.
You get hangry?
Because I'm hangry.
Yep.
Exactly right. 1/3 of business doesn't recognize IT as a value creator. A very interesting read. And the reason I bring some of these articles in is because of security's association with IT, sometimes around that stigma, is we can apply some of these findings potentially to us as well in the security industry. How many companies view security as a value creator?
Right.
That's kind of an oxymoron for most of us in the security space, right? So again, these articles I bring in because I want us as professionals to learn, how are we viewed in the organization? Are we viewed as inhibitors or value creators? This article talks about it from an IT perspective. I thought this was really interesting. Mendix surveyed 1,000 business and IT stakeholders in medium to large size companies globally, where half of the respondents say their budgets are too limited to deliver solutions at scale. And only a third saw the business technology decision makers as value creators. So just some interesting stats in here of this continual concept of digital transformation. As businesses need to continue to move and transform, is IT a partner in that in helping them create value through that transformation?
I hope so.
Or are they inhibiting growth?
Yeah,
they have to be part of that whole, basically the value delivered to your customers in a business. IT and security have to be.
They have to be right?
Tied to that. Right? IT is a little harder the further separate it is from the product, perhaps, when you get down in the nitty gritty. But at the end of the day, it's really one thing. IT is providing a service that makes the business more efficient and able to deliver a better product and or service to your customers, and that's what the value creation is for me right now. Product is like, if you were to say we're going to do DevOps and Agile and you apply that directly to your software product, I think that's going to have a direct positive impact.
It all depends on the business you're in, right? I mean, at the end of the day,
it does.
And I was surprised at some of these numbers. They were a lot worse than I thought they were going to be. But to that point, I think we as IT practitioners and IT leaders need to do a better job of communicating upstream the value we're bringing.
Agreed.
And by the way, don't have those conversations in IT or security terminology. Talk to the business, right? And that's one thing that I want to say to any IT or security leader that's out there. Start knowing the business, learn the business, build relationships with the business units, because that's the type of conversations you need to have, right?
Because I think I'm seeing a slow trend where consumers, whether those are enterprises, business to business, or B2C, consumers in general are focusing a little more on security. We heard it when we were at Compass IT security, cybersecurity symposium last week, where a lot of people, we saw a presentation by Jesse on IoT, and some were like, yeah, I don't want any IoT because it's not secure, or I want to get like the smart doorbell, but I'm afraid of the security. Right. And when you can point to a company that's like, well, no, this, Ring, for example, I know from researching them, when they do have a security vulnerability, they're really good about handling it. They push automatic updates, and they're better about it than some of the other IoT vendors. And that's inspiring confidence. And I think whether the business is a consumer or it's an individual that is in your home, it's more and more becoming part of the conversation when we're talking about adopting a product or service. And it can become a
competitive advantage.
Absolutely.
100% can become a competitive advantage for an organization, right? I
think in IoT, like it's still in its infancy, but it's playing a factor.
Yeah, right. I mean, think about it. If that doorbell company came out and said, you want to know what? We are the most secure, privacy-focused organization, and we can prove it, and here you go.
Yes.
Beat us up, test us, we'll show you. That will push some consumer confidence out there like we've never seen.
And the advantage in that scenario is it is a security device for your home as well, which has a parallel into the enterprise security that we recommend for enterprises too.
No, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, and that kind of leads into this next article on shift to digital businesses booming, but our CEOs ignoring associated risk. John Wheeler from Gartner was speaking last week at the FAIR conference and brought up some very interesting points that people have to realize is that digital business is where CEOs want to move, but they have to recognize if we're digital, it's not only a huge risk, it's a complex risk.
Yeah.
These digital transformation projects in the technology we're deploying, in the integration of all these different technologies, not only creates large risk areas, but it's also very complex because the second point he makes is you have to understand associated risk. And that is hard for a lot of organizations to get their heads wrapped around when we think about these very complex business systems.
Oh, absolutely. And it's not just technology risk. There could be compliance risk, regulatory risk, legal risk, all of these other business risks across the organization that, as CISOs or as security leaders, it may be our job to kind of bring all the stakeholders in and say, hey, listen, it's not just technology risk here. Legal, come in. Finance, come in, right? And let's have conversations about overarching business risk.
Yeah, I think the more we push the digital, I think the easier it is for someone you're partnering with or using as a service or whatever to say, we're not going to do business with you because your security stuff isn't in order.
That's right.
And that's a real, as we transform into more digital business, a lot of those decisions are being made as we see more compliance like GDPR and such. Like, would you partner with someone who is not focusing on compliance or doing... I think it's going to become more and more of a business issue.
You want to talk about adding value? We talked about it in the previous article.
Yes.
When you're sitting in the room with the CEO and you have finance there and legal there and your services team there and you're leading a conversation about enterprise risk, that shows value.
Right.
Yeah. And his third point was developing a risk-aware culture means deciphering the difference between digital business risk and cyber risk because they're not the same.
Right.
I mean, we tend to think of cyber risk as technology risk, but there's a lot of other risk associated with digital business transformation, and you have to understand the differences, but also where they overlap, because those create some very interesting risk areas that need to be addressed by the business.
Yeah, no, 100% agreed. Again,
risk management's back.
Yeah, I mean, the article actually says, IRM is GRC repackaged at this point, right?
Yes, that's what we're going to cover on the news show starting tomorrow. So
there you go.
Because we're going to dig into some of these topics.
So 5G, everyone's talking about 5G.
Everybody's talking 5G. And the reason I brought this in was, one, I think it's good for people to have kind of a base place to start to understand what is 5G, first of all. And then what are some of the potential use cases around 5G as you start thinking about technology transformation? The third one is we're actually going to talk on ESW this week, Paul. We're bringing on somebody that did some Huawei research, and Huawei's been in the news about their 5G technology. So we're going to dig in under the covers a little bit. So this is kind of a precursor for ESW on Wednesday with Finite State. So that's why I brought this article in. But, look, 5G is the latest iteration of cell technology. We've all heard about it. But what are some of the interesting ways 5G is going to change business? And so I pulled a couple out from this article, right? The ability to have fixed wireless for better business connectivity. Think about that. We're used to hardwiring our branch locations.
Right.
Can we actually use 5G wireless now to connect those? And what are the implications from a security perspective that way?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's amazing. I mean, they were having conversations in here about private 5G networks, right? And that could play into there. So now having your own private 5G network to interconnect all of your facilities together. Amazing.
Yeah, and think about the technology shifts and some of the security issues associated with that when we think about doing that. And we also know that this is going to give us expanded coverage. This is going to allow us to tap into new rural areas that couldn't get coverage. So now we think about even potentially more connected people around the world, because now we can expand coverage into areas we couldn't have before. And now we're putting more systems into the environment, which has always been the promise, right? Billions of devices.
Right. And the one thing that caught my eye was municipal or public sector security, right? Law enforcement and having these high resolution security cameras on this network and, using it from a government perspective. Now I start saying, oh boy, right? So that's where my, my tinfoil hat starts to come out and say, oh boy, private 5G networks, government run.
Yeah, right. No thanks. Anyways, if you want to learn more about 5G, there's a great article, some use cases, but if you want to dig into some of the interesting research on Huawei, we're going to cover that on ESW this week. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us. Everyone, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next week on Business Security Weekly.